Caitlin started having headaches. She'd be running and playing and then all of a sudden just stop and grab her head and say, ow. And then, by the time you got her some ibuprofen, or it was summertime, you're like, here, drink some water, you're dehydrated. They wouldn't last very long, and then she'd be up and going again. But they started getting more and more frequent and lasting longer. Let's just do the MRI, rule that out, and then we'll go down the migraines and allergies or whatever else that it could be headaches. So we did that, and then I had them send me the report, and it said Chiari. I had been aware of it just in my practice as an optometrist, and some vision-related things that possibly could happen. And then we also have another family member, a cousin of mine, who had Chiari and wasn't diagnosed until his 30s and went through a decompression. So it was on our radar, but that was not what we were looking for. She had her first surgery in Denver, and she did very well. We came home and, kids just bounce back so quickly, and her headaches improved, and she did really well for 6 to 9 months or so.
Yeah, it wasn't very long.
Yeah, and so then all of her symptoms just kind of came back. Meantime, we're dealing with Kate's getting worse. Ezra is not quite right. We kind of sort of ignore that. Like, he's 3-year-old, but he laid around. He just didn't have the energy as a 3-year-old. He didn't want to eat. He would complain at nighttime, crying that his tummy hurt and his legs would hurt. A couple mornings he got up and it just looked like one leg just was weak. Didn't really work. And that was concerning. We traveled from Nebraska to Detroit to meet with Dr. Gilmer.
It happens. If you have a first-degree relative with Chiari, you have about a 1 in 10 chance of having Chiari yourself. Caitlin, when I met her, she was 7 years old. She had previously had surgery for a Chiari malformation, which was fairly severe. And she had gotten imaging studies that showed the syrinx, or the fluid collection in the spinal cord, hadn't gone away. And usually it will at least go down significantly, decrease in size, or almost completely resolve, but hers looked almost the same. We took her to surgery and decompressed the back of her head, essentially suboccipital craniectomy, which means to remove the bone at the back of the skull. A little bit more. She had that done, but some of the bone had grown back a little bit because she's very young when she had the surgery. So opened that up a little bit more. After the dura was more exposed, then I opened the previous graft again, and the graft had thickened as it had healed and contracted. So it had become really like thick, scarred leather, and that had scarred down to her brain and scarred down to the bottom of the cerebellum, the cerebellar tonsils, and over the fourth ventricle. So there wasn't any fluid flowing between the brain and spinal cord. The whole area was just stuck down with scar. I peeled that off, peeled it down, and actually removed that tissue because if it has scarred down to the brain before, it'll scar back to the brain again if you leave it in. And then replaced it with a bovine pericardium graft, which is the lining of a sheep or cow's heart. And that works very well and tends not to scar down to the brain. On the post-operative scan, we have removed the bone at the bottom of the skull. C1 had already been removed as well as C2 on a previous procedure. So the area has been opened more widely, the old graft has been removed, and the cerebellar tonsils have also been partially resected to open up this space. Now the opening to the fourth ventricle is much more open here, and there's plenty of fluid surrounding the brainstem and spinal cord at the back of the skull as well as in the upper cervical spine.
We got through that, and now here we go with Ezra.
This is Ezra's MRI. And on these images, T2 weighted images, the fluid is bright and the brain and cerebellum and brainstem are gray. So here you see the cerebellar tonsils extending down into the upper cervical spine, and there is absolutely no bright signal surrounding the brainstem and spinal cord here. The spinal cord and medulla are quite squeezed by this extra tissue going down into the foramen magnum. On his post-operative MRI here, we can see that the bone is now removed from here to here. This is a suboccipital craniectomy. A C1 laminectomy has been done, and the dura has been opened and expanded with this graft. Now you see the fourth ventricle, and you clearly see fluid coming out of the fourth ventricle, fluid surrounding the brainstem and spinal cord.
They're doing really well. Ezra is like phenomenal. Like a week after his surgery, you wouldn't even know. I mean, we stayed in Detroit for 2 weeks, and I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to keep this kid inside? We're used to being outside of the farm, and he's running and jumping on the couch, and I'm like, you just had brain surgery.
But children recover very, very well from surgery. So it's very, very rewarding to be able to help them.
Well, it's been a long journey since both of our kids have been diagnosed with Chiari and had surgery, but now they've healed, and hopefully we can get back on with living our lives.
From one mom to another, if your child is diagnosed with Chiari, don't wait. Call Dr. Gilmer at Michigan Head and Spine Institute.
Thank you, Dr. Gilmer.